Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's featured Reddit stories are from PettyRevenge. Story 1 is by Da Bacon Man. I left my grandmother without internet for 4 months. So, for some context as to why I felt I wanted revenge. My grandmother on my dad's side is just an awful person. I'll list the reasons here. Pick any of them as to the why. Frankly, she has more revenge coming her way. I'm just not going out of my way to deliver it. Feel free to skip down to the paragraph marked Petty Revenge to avoid reading too much of a woman you don't care to know. First off, my dad had saved up for a nice car for my mother's birthday present. This was to be a new off-the-lot car, her first ever car that wasn't over 10 years old at purchase. My dad saved a quarter of the car's worth and used it as a down payment, but put the loan in grandmother's name due to her better credit. He obviously had permission to do so, but because the loan was in grandmother's name, so was the car. She said my dad could drive it, but she'll report it stolen if mom is ever caught behind the wheel of her own birthday present. Another time my parents were trying to buy a house, grandmother offered to pay for the full house, just sign here. The contract she gave them was not a deed to a house, but a rental agreement. She wanted 3 times the market value in rent and specifically stated that all guests would have to be approved by grandmother prior to the visit. Plus, named my 15-year-old sister as an unwelcome tenant and visitor. My parents didn't sign, but noted the attempt. Years later, my great-grandparents both needed help and offered free housing to my parents in exchange for taking care of them, mainly just grocery shopping and helping to get to bed. Great-grandmother lasted the longest but put a stipulation in her will that grandmother got the house, but only after my parents had saved enough to buy their own. Grandmother left an eviction notice on the door for my parents to find coming home from her own mother's funeral, stating that with all the free rent they had received, they have enough money to move out. I got a letter in the mail one day after getting engaged to my current wife. It stated that I was no longer to contact my grandmother because the choice I made in a spouse sickens her. She lists religion as a reason. Odd being that I and my wife are both non-practicing Christians before we met each other. My parents are agnostics. And grandmother had changed religions 7 times since I was old enough to count. She sometimes was Buddhist or just spiritual, but mainly hopped between different denominations of Christian. There's more, but it goes too heavy for a petty revenge. Petty revenge. Through her numerous shenanigans, she had become a no contact for any family in the area. I hadn't cared to send a letter specifically stating that I don't want contact with you. I just figured the never having seen her in 5 years even though I lived 2 miles away kinda had meant that. She reached out to me, inquired about my new family and how she wanted to meet her great-grandchild. Great-grandchildren, I corrected her. Since when? Well, I have a 6, 5, and 3-year-old. Oh, well, she would love to meet them, and could you come over and help with the internet not working? Of course, grandmother. I'd love to. I went over to help her and saw her problem is that she had switched providers, and the new provider just needed her to confirm a date to hook it up to her house. I asked her what she needs internet for. Netflix and scheduling clients. Well, I see right here your internet is on lie. You just don't have a subscription to Netflix on your mail. So I canceled her internet hookup and put her down for 2 more subscriptions to Netflix. It's all good, grandmother. They should be here to install your internet in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from her. My internet is still not working. So I drive over to show her that my phone works in her house, because I'm using my own data. Oh, here's the problem. You're not signed up for the Max subscription. In our area, we need Max to get any other devices besides a phone to connect. And that's how I got her signed up for HBO Max. And I was sure to remember the login info so I could leech. It should be up in a month. Man, that's long. They must be backed up. A month later, I get another call about her internet not being up. Oopsies, I put my address in by mistake. Now they need to reschedule the appointment. A month later. My internet still doesn't work. Oh, grandmother, you had to pay them again for the new appointment. This time I signed her up for Disney Plus and Hulu bundle. A month later, this time my uncle. Why is grandmother's internet not working and why is she signed up for like 20 streaming services? I don't know. She says you were helping her with internet and have been screwing around for 4 months? Uncle, I haven't talked to grandmother in 7 years since she very publicly declared that I sicken her. Ask her yourself, she probably doesn't even know how many kids I have. She didn't know the answer. I assumed she finally got her internet, but unfortunately I no longer have free HBO. Last I heard, she's also getting tested for Alzheimer's. It seems she's forgetting things and making up imaginary visits with people from her past. Uncle also took all her credit and debit cards away so she can't repeat subscriptions. Pretty petty, I would say deserved as well. Sometimes there's petty revenge and I don't always think it's deserved. But in this case I feel like it is. It would be super kind and generous of you to forgive her because some people do change over the years. But you're not required to. And if she was this awful to you in your youth, and when you first got married, her saying that your choice of spouse sickens her, I don't know, I would have gone no contact as well. Story number 2 is by inappropriate name. It is a throwaway account though. I was kind of glad I didn't get to go. When I was a kid, my stepfather had a purpose-recorded road trip mixtape, made up of all the songs he'd listened to with his own parents on road trips. Elvis, Bobby Darin, Paul Anka, and all stuff that was a hit around 1960. And we hated it. There are only so many times you can hear Annette Funicello before you want to roll down your window, stick your head out, and hope a passing truck takes it clean off. So it really wasn't hard to figure out why the tape went missing during a camping trip in 1987. A year or so later, we were supposed to go fishing for the weekend, but my youngest brother, tattletale weasel he was, decided to tell tales about me being behind on homework. It was true, of course, but not nearly as bad as he made it sound. Just a side note, OP, if it's true, it doesn't make it a tale, it makes it the truth. Still, it meant I was going to have to stay home with Mom and finish it instead. The next morning, I volunteered to help pack up the car and make sure to do 2 things. Vanish the bag of peach rings my brother hid in the door pocket and pop the road trip mixtape into the stereo. When my stepdad started the car and blue suede shoes began to pour out of the speakers, he was so happy he headed back in, gave my mother a kiss, and thanked her for finding it. She had no idea what he was talking about, but she played along for a minute until he left again and then just stared at me. What? I happened to find that oldies mixtape of his in with my camping stuff the other day when I packed for fishing. Was I not supposed to give it back to him? Pretty sure Mom was the one that made it disappear the second and final time. Most of these performers are really good bands and or artists. But yeah, you can only listen to them so many times before you want something else. Especially if they're oldies and you're a young kid at the time. Isn't it true, though, that most young kids don't appreciate the really good, older music until they themselves get to around 20 or so? And then they generally start to like it, but not on repeat and not on every road trip. Our last story today is by The Best Possum. Remove your stuff or I will. Will what? Stand until we reach our final destination? I just read a post on here and a comment that reminded me of this story. A friend and I traveled a short distance by train to spend a day off enjoying an extended walk, light hike. The train commutes back and forth between 2 cities and we wanted to get out before the final stop. We boarded, found adjacent seats and started our ride. The train started filling up after a few stops. About half point of the journey, she went to the loo while I played on my phone, but not before placing her bag on her seat to make it clear it's reserved. A minute or so later, next stop came. Some dude our age must have boarded, taken a look around and seen me and my friend's seat. He came up and without further ado went, "Move your stuff or I will." I was really taken aback because who does that instead of asking, "Is this seat reserved?" or something. I sadly didn't have a beautiful clapback and didn't call him out for his rudeness. I just said, "That's not my stuff. Friend will be back in a minute." He didn't even say anything. let alone apologize, just glared at me and remained standing up. My friend came back. Later, I went to pee, and when I came back, she told me that our stop is in a few minutes. I saw that dude shift. Obviously, I can't know why, but I like to imagine he was preparing to take our seats after our imminent departure. That was when the pettiness arose in me, and I asked my friend, "You know what, how about we start the hike a bit later and first go the remaining distance to the final stop, get a coffee and a Franz Bottchen?" She said, "Sure, why not? We have the whole day and it's been a long time since I had a proper Franz Bottchen." For clarification, that's a type of regional pastry traditional made in Hamburg. That's when I couldn't resist turning to look at the dude who now looked pretty furious, and I couldn't stop myself from laughing, which he obviously saw. The Franz Bottchen were delicious, and my friend laughed her butt off when I later told her how I got the idea of making the loop to Hamburg. There are some people who will just roll over if a jerk says this to you, "Move your stuff or I will." I've seen people with their stuff in a seat next to them on the bus because they just don't want somebody sitting next to them. But you can say to them, "Hey, is this seat taken?" But what do you gain from just being rude to somebody? That yes, there's people that don't want somebody to sit next to them, so they might put their stuff in the seat next to them. Do you really want to ride next to somebody who's uncomfortable with your presence next to them, though? Like, you're better off not sitting next to the person, generally. But to come up to somebody and say, "Move your stuff or I will," yeah, no. Even if I don't have a friend sitting in that seat, I'm not moving my stuff. I'm not going to tolerate sitting next to that guy. But it sounds like OP didn't have to tolerate sitting next to them either. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a petty day.